I was sick unto death, with long agony. I lay upon my back unbound. I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I dared not to employ my vision. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew aghast, lest there should be nothing to see. At length, with a wild desperation, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close. A fearful idea suddenly drove the blood in torrents upon my heart, and I started to my feet, trembling convulsively. I thrust my arms wildly around me in all directions. I felt nothing, yet dreaded to move a step, lest I should be impeded by the walls of a tomb. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable, and I cautiously moved forward, with my arms extended and my eyes straining from their sockets. I proceeded for many paces. Still all was blackness and vacancy. I breathed more freely. It seemed that mine was not at least the most hideous of fates. As I continued onward, there came thronging upon my recollection 1,000 vague rumors of the horrors of Toledo, of the dungeons of the Inquisition. There had been strange things narrated, fables I had always deemed them, too ghastly to repeat, save in a whisper. Was I left to perish of starvation in this subterranean world of darkness? Or what fate, perhaps even more fearful, awaited me? My outstretched hands at length encountered a wall, seemingly of stone masonry, smooth, slimy, and cold. Quitting the wall, I resolved to cross the area of the enclosure. I proceeded with extreme caution, for the floor, although solid, was treacherous with slime. I had advanced some 10 or 12 paces in this manner, when I stepped on the torn hem of my robe, and fell violently on my face. My chin rested upon the floor of the prison, but the upper portion of my head touched nothing. My forehead seemed bathed in a clammy vapor, and the smell of decayed fungus arose to my nostrils. I put forward my arm, and shuddered to find that it had fallen at the very brink of a circular pit. Groping about the masonry just below the margin, I dislodged a small fragment and let it fall into the abyss. I saw clearly the doom which had been prepared for me. Another step, and the world had seen me no more. I had read of these pits. The sudden extinction of life formed no part of the most horrible plan. I found by my side a loaf and a pitcher of water. I emptied the vessel at a draught. It must have been drugged, for scarcely had I drunk before a deep sleep fell upon me. When I unclosed my eyes, the objects around me were visible by a sulphurous lustre, the origin of which I could not determine. I was enabled to see the extent and aspect of the prison. What I had taken for masonry seemed to be huge metal plates. The entire surface of this metallic enclosure was daubed in hideous and repulsive devices, fiends in aspects of menace. The floor was of stone. In the center yawned the circular pit from whose jaws I had escaped. My personal condition had been greatly changed. I now lay upon my back on a low framework of wood, securely bound by a long strap. It passed in many convolutions about my limbs and body, leaving at liberty only my head and my left arm to such extent that I could supply myself with food from an earthen dish on the floor. I was consumed with an intolerable thirst. It appeared to be the design of my persecutors to stimulate, for the food in the dish was meat, pungently seasoned. I surveyed the ceiling of my prison, some 30 or 40 feet overhead, and constructed much as the walls. In one of its panels was the painted figure of Time. In lieu of a scythe, he held what I supposed to be the pictured image of a huge pendulum, such as we see on antique clocks. While I gazed up at it, I fancied that I saw it in motion. Its sweep was brief and slow. I watched it for some minutes, in fear and wonder. A slight noise attracted my notice, and looking to the floor, I saw several enormous rats that had issued from the well, allured by the scent of the meat. It might have been an hour before I again cast my eyes upward. What I then saw confounded me. The sweep of the pendulum had increased by nearly a yard, and it had perceptibly descended. I now observed with horror that its nether extremity was a crescent of glittering steel, about a foot in length, the under edge as keen as a razor. It was appended to a weighty rod of brass, and the whole hissed as it swung through the air. I could no longer doubt the doom prepared for me by the inquisitorial agents. What boots it to tell of the long hours of horror during which I counted the rushing vibrations of steel? It might have been the days past ere it swept so closely over me as to fan me with its acrid breath. The pendulum was at right angles to my length. The crescent was designed to cross the region of the heart. Down, steadily down it crept, to the right, to the left, down, relentlessly down, It vibrated within 3 inches of my bosom. Down, unceasingly, inevitably down. 10 or 12 vibrations would bring the steel in actual contact with my robe. And with this observation, there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen collected calmness of despair. There flashed upon my mind an idea, feeble, scarcely sane, but still entire. For many hours, the immediate vicinity had been swarming with rats, wild, bold, ravenous. They had devoured all but a small remnant of the contents of the dish. With the particles of the oily spiced viand which remained, I rubbed my bandage wherever I could. Then I lay breathlessly still, observing that I remained without motion. 1 or 2 of the boldest leaped upon the framework and smelt to the strap. This signaled a general rush. Forth from the well they hurried, and leaped in hundreds upon my person. They busied themselves with the anointed bandage. They writhed upon my throat. Their cold lips sought my own. Disgust swelled my bosom and chilled my heart. Yet plainly I perceived the loosening of the bandage. With a more than human resolution, I lay still. At length, the strap hung in ribbons from my body. The pendulum already pressed upon my bosom. Twice again it swung, and a sharp pain shot through every nerve. But the moment of escape had arrived. Cautious, sidelong, shrinking, I slid beyond the reach of the scimitar. I was free. Free. And in the grasp of the Inquisition. I had scarcely stepped from my wooden bed of horror when the motion of the hellish machine ceased, and I beheld it drawn up by some invisible force through the ceiling. My every motion was undoubtedly watched. I have observed that the figures upon the walls were now assuming a startling brilliancy. Demon eyes glared upon me in 1,000 directions, gleamed with the lurid lustre of fire. There came to my nostrils the vapor of heated iron. I gasped for breath. I shrank from the glowing metal to the center of the cell. The idea of the coolness of the well came over my soul like balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining vision below. The glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its inmost recesses. Oh, any horror but this! With a shriek, I buried my face in my hands, weeping bitterly. When I looked up, shuddering, there had been a second change. The room had been square. 2 of its angles were now acute, too obtuse. The difference increased with a low rumbling. The apartment shifted its form into that of a lozenge. I neither hoped nor desired it to stop. Death, I said. Any death but that of the pit. Fool, might I have not known that into the pit it was the object of the burning iron to urge me. At length, for my seared and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. The agony of my soul found vent in one final scream of despair. I tottered upon the brink. I averted my eyes. There was a discordant hum of human voices, a loud blast as of many trumpets, a harsh grating as the fiery walls rushed back. An outstretched arm caught my own as I fell, fainting into the abyss. It was that of General Lasalle. The French army had entered Toledo. The Inquisition was in the hands of its enemies.